Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, Peak Performance Coach, Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Bamboo Lab podcast. As always, I am your host, Brian Bosley. I want to start off today with a heart letter that came in, I believe, 2 weeks ago. And this letter just was a Facebook message that said, "Hi, Brian. Just wanted to tell you that I'm really enjoying your podcast. They're awesome, practical, inspirational, great work." And then he went on to share that he was the field leader who hired one of our amazing guests, Sabrina, from 2 weeks ago, and how much of a gem she was to find and how amazing she is to watching her grow. And he just said, "You guys did a great job on the podcast. Great stuff. Please continue leading on." So now we're going to have this gentleman on the podcast in a couple of weeks from reaching out. So, and kind of like the guest we have on today, which you guys are going to flip and love, man. I got to talk to him a couple of times over the past several years, once 2 weeks ago, and there's just instant connection. This guy's got charisma, style, and a ton of energy. So I'm going to just share that right now, because of all of you Bamboo Pack members out there, we are closing in on 1,400 subscribers in 1,400 cities around the globe right now. Probably by the end of today or tomorrow, we'll be over the 1,400 city mark. So I want to thank all of you Bamboo Pack members for listening, tuning in, smashing that like button, giving us rating and reviews on all the comments we're getting. And thank you for sharing it with people. I ask everyone every episode, please share with 3 people you love. And that's how we continue to grow across all the continents. And I don't know I forget how many countries we're in now, but quite a few and a lot of cities. So, all right. So let's get on to the guest today, because I want to jump right into him. Today we have on with us, and I think we've known each other on and off for a while, but I want to share how this gentleman came to get to know the podcast. And I got to find it here because I'm not the most adept at, you guys know, I'm not really good at this computer stuff sometimes. So February 27th of this year, I got a LinkedIn message from Brandon. And he said, "Hi, Brian, your podcast has been changing me how I think about my time and energy. Thank you for what you do. Someday I hope to achieve enough to be a guest." I'm like, dude, Brandon, I appreciate your kind words. What makes you think you aren't ready now? And here we are, 1 month later, he's a guest on the podcast. I mean, and that's what I like about him. The guy just reaches out, man, and he just humble, successful, confident, courageous. I love people like this. So today we have Brandon Hegg on the podcast. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Brandon before I introduce him. Brandon started his career in the financial world in 2008. He's amassed 15 years of sales production, leadership, and coaching experience. He's really done a lot of work with very highly successful financial advisors around the country. And what he does is he helps them to grow their practice. And when you hear him today, you'll see how passionate he is just about helping people to achieve their personal and professional goals. He began his career at my mothership, Ameriprise Financial. Of course, when I started, it was called IDS Financial Services. And he spent over a decade in Minneapolis and in Las Vegas, working in a lot of various roles. But with his focus has always been on development and the success of new advisors to the firm and the industry at that time. Following his time with Ameriprise, Brandon held roles with Prudential Financial and TruChoice Financial, working on sales and career development programs before he finally landed his current role in this current firm, Extraordinary Financial Advisors, XFA. Check these people out, folks. I know Brandon. I know John Randall, who's with the company. Amazing people. They do amazing work. We're going to be including links to their website on here. And he at XFA, he continues to work with and develop just that, the Extraordinary Financial Advisors. So Extraordinary Financial Advisors, XFA. That's what they work with, man. Extraordinary Financial Advisors. So Brandon lives in one of my favorite cities, at least my favorite Midwestern cities. He lives in Minnesota with his wife and his stepdaughter. When he's not working, he spends his free time trying to catch the next trophy fish. He likes to leave the cold of Minnesota for somewhere warm or cheering on the Minnesota Golden Gophers. All right. I'm a Michigan fan, Brandon, but despite all of that, Brandon Hegg, welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Thanks, Brian. It's big time of year here in Minnesota. We've got the Frozen Four with the hockey team being successful, so that'll be big news for a little while. And Michigan won the Big Ten, though, so you've got some bragging rights there too.
They're in the Frozen Four.
Oh, they are. They did make it. They made the Frozen Four. If they had got it. Okay, well then we're going to have to shoot some text messages back and forth here in a couple weeks.
They won in overtime on Saturday, I think it was. Saturday or Sunday.
I couldn't remember if they pulled it out or not.
Yeah, they won in overtime. So it's one of the only times of the year I'll actually watch college hockey is if Michigan makes the final, the Frozen Four. So we didn't make the NCAA tournament this year for basketball, so I have to at least root for somebody. Hey, before we get started, I want to shout out to a new subscriber out there that I heard about. Never met the man, but Dominic out of Jersey. I was told not to say New Jersey because nobody calls it that. Dominic out of Jersey. I want to thank you for tuning in, subscribing, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast. All right, Brandon, let's get started, man. I know, you and I had such a great conversation. I think that was the 17th of March, so just 11 days ago or so. I got to know more about you, but can you share with me more who you are, where you came from, and share with the Bamboo Pack anything you'd like to share about growing up or whatever it took to get you to be the man you are today?
Yeah, so I grew up in central Wisconsin, so about 3 hours east of Minneapolis. And I grew up in what I would call pretty privileged in terms of, I had my family support. I had a lot of opportunities to, play sports, to learn. So right now, my mom, stepfather, dad, and stepmom all live in that same town in central Wisconsin. But I got the opportunity to come and go to school here at the University of Minnesota, which at the time I think it was actually cheaper for Wisconsin kids to come to Minnesota and Minnesota kids to go to the University of Wisconsin. So we had a small group of really 6 or 7 guys that we all grew up together. We went to college together. And then after college, I didn't really know what to do. I bounced around from, every conceivable major that was somewhat interesting to me. I was taking classes. At one point I was designing my own degree, and it got to the point where I was like, okay, time to step into the real world and out of school. And that's when I came across the job posting at Ameriprise. And I didn't know anything about finance, but I figured, okay, it's sales, and sales is talking to people. I generally could handle that. So I took a shot, got my opportunity to join Ameriprise, and then through various roles of leadership, of coaching, of training, development, really put together this career, and where I found my satisfaction and my enjoyment, almost like Sabrina's story from a couple of weeks ago. And I think I know who that field leader is that you mentioned. But it's something I found that I liked working with and seeing the success of others. So when I really sat down and thought about, what brings me more personal joy, is it making a sale, or is it, helping a client achieve a goal, or is it watching someone else do that? And I just enjoyed working with the people that were working with clients. And so that's where I built my career. And then the last really, I would say 7 or 8 years was focused on young professionals, developing, helping them, kind of put some of their career plans in place, get started on the right foot. And the energy and the quick wins that you can get out of that, when someone does something that a month ago they thought wasn't possible, is where, for me, it just drives that genuine just joy and satisfaction in what it is we do.
Yeah, your passion comes through. It does. And Brandon, you and I had a connection. We almost did some work together several years ago.
Yes.
What was that? My memory fails me sometimes, but I vaguely remember it, and you remembered it. I think you had mentioned it before.
Yeah, so it was when I was in working as the home office. I think it was on the training team. We were doing some leadership coaching or some leadership programming for our field leaders. And your name had come through from, I can't remember who was the referral, but somebody had said, hey, you got to talk to Brian. He's been there. He knows it. And like leadership coaching is his forte. And that's how we just first started talking. And I think we did like a virtual session or a training session where you were kind of leading and our guest star for it. And so that's originally how you and I got connected. And then I started seeing the Bamboo podcast posts that you were putting out. And I thought, well, that looks interesting. Let me take a listen. And then, as the podcast grew, as, the Bamboo Pack continued to grow, it just, I just kept listening. And every week when it came out and what I found was the level of just honesty, vulnerability, and seeing some of these people that, professors at Harvard, high up in the military, authors, leaders like Sabrina really share that idea of, we've got some of it figured out, but we're still learning too. And that just resonated with me. And it was something that I just wanted to reach out to you and say, hey, I really appreciate what you're putting together. And like I said, someday would hope to be on it. Here it is.
31 days later.
Yeah, that was quick.
That was quick. That was awesome. Yeah, I checked. You guys play Boston University in the first round. Michigan plays, is it Quinnipiac?
Yeah, I think, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but that sounds right.
So we might end up playing each other in the final game.
I'm hoping for it because there's the old adage of it's hard to beat a team 3 times, and Michigan's already beat Minnesota twice.
Oh, okay.
So I'm like, all right, 3rd time's the charm. Minnesota's got to pull one out.
We'll have to. We'll be texting. We'll be texting back and forth. I haven't seen one hockey game all year, probably in 2 or 3 years, but I'll be the biggest hockey fan over the next few days here. So, all right. So it sounds like you bounced around a little bit after college, but when you found that niche, when you landed in that spot, you found home at Ameriprise, and you really started finding your groove. We had a guest on last week from Elite Resource Team, Paul Latham, and he talked about that too. Sometimes he said, when you tell people to follow their passion, it's like, well, hell, people don't even know what their passion is sometimes. Sometimes we have to bounce around and really respect those sliding doors that happen in life where opportunities come that you weren't expecting, or a window opens up while another window shuts, a door opens, and you find you kind of walk through this maze and you find the cheese somewhere that you've been looking for all of your life because you just kept yourself open to it. And it obviously now, 15 years later, here you are, and now with XFA, I mean, this is going to be, I'm looking forward to watching you guys just expand and blow up. I really am, man. It's so exciting. I think the world of John. I think the world of you. So I think it's just, I don't know anybody else on the team. If I do, I apologize if I didn't mention names, but I do know you, both of you, and you're both extraordinary men. So,
it's really,
go ahead.
I was going to say, it's really interesting you say that. I'm going to interject quick because this happened to me this morning. Because one of the things I've told you is, and you've talked about it on the podcast in the past, is that idea of, you put things out into the world and things kind of manifest, or it's that, as it's the same idea of you never see a certain type of vehicle and then you buy one and then it's everywhere, right? Like that, certain things just pop up. And this morning, I was just kind of scrolling through social media, and there was a quote that was on there that I think ties into this. And it talks about, it was really timely, at least for me at that moment, to read it. But it talks about this purpose. Somebody asks, what's the purpose of life? And they keep thinking about, or how we've designed a lot of societal measures is on these, this goal achievement and, hitting these goals or hitting these marks, when really it could be, that conversation you had with someone that changed the way they thought about their day or changed the way they thought about a problem. And it really is in these interactions. And, at the end of the day, does it matter, oh, I achieved all this, I have all these toys and all this money, or is it, wow, I really got to touch some people's lives? And reframing that every so often is, I think, one of the good things that we can talk through. And Paul touched on it right there with, everyone thinks like, what's next? What's this next thing? But really, you've got to be open to find what's it for you and what's your purpose and your meaning.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of the things, Brandon, we've been doing with my client base lately, and it's something I did several years ago, is helping them each to work to determine what are your 3 measurements for living? What are your 3 measurements for life? So I paint the picture. You're 110 years old. You've been told you have 3 hours to live. How do you know if your life was successful? Because it's not going to be based on toys, assets. It's not. Those things can't go with you. They're completely useless and irrelevant to you at that point. And so when it comes down to, and now this is based on when they've worked with centenarians, people who are 100 years old. They've asked them to go back in your life and they've asked these people, if you could go back in your life, what would you do differently, or what do you regret most? And almost to the person across the world, they all said almost the same things. I would have spent more quality time with people that I love. I would have chased my dreams, and I would have enjoyed moments. And so I'm like, so with that being the basis, I'm telling people, design your life now. What are the 3 things you measure? And every night when you go to bed, ask yourself, overall, did I do these 3 things? And they should be action items. Like mine are strive to give and be my best every day, show love and respect to others, and live intentionally. So strive, love, live. And so that's what I base. Those are my measurements. And so everybody should have measurements, and that's your purpose. And those are the things that you're going to go, that's what you'll take to the grave. And if you can say overall, not with perfection, but with consistency and growth over time, did you do those 3 things overall? Then that's a successful life, or that's a successful day, or whatever it might be. So I couldn't agree with you more. So go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm going to flip the script and pull one of the tricks that you do. So for anybody that didn't write those things down that Brian was just talking about, grab your paper and find your 3 things, because I'm going to do that when we're done.
I think I just found a co-host.
It's you tell people, oh, write down what this person said. So I figure it goes both ways.
I appreciate that, brother. I think the Bamboo Lab with Brian and Brandon would be pretty cool. It's got a pretty good sling to it. 3 B's on the.
It does.
Yeah,
solid alliteration.
Hell yeah, I could handle that. I need a little help sometimes. Trust me. All right. So looking at you're a highly inspired man. There's no doubt about that. You have a lot of this ability that you think through things, but you also have some deep emotion. So to get to that point now in your life, Brandon, who or what inspired you growing up?
Yeah, I just talked to her. I got a text message from her this morning, and it was my stepmom. Her name's Robin. And when I look at, kind of career, and I look at where she's gone, like what she does on a daily basis, not only for work, not only for, the family, but also then in her community. When I first met her, I was, 8. I can't remember, at some point in grade school. And I remember, she was working, I think she was in reception for one of our local companies. And now she's been head HR of multiple organizations. I think she was named one of the business women of the year in our local town. She does junior achievement. It's just, her courage and her ability to look at an opportunity or look at a challenge that someone laid in front of her. And even if she wasn't completely certain how to do it, she'd think through, figure out if it was the right move, and then take it on head first. And as I was talking to her, one of the things I didn't know was she mentioned that, as she got these opportunities, this wasn't something that she would apply for. It would be, she'd get tapped on the shoulder. And, just that idea of just put your head down, bring your best every day. And then when you have the time to give back, do that rather than, that idea of, oh, I'm going to sit in my house with all my things and look at my, pictures or look at the things that I've accumulated. She's out there saying, all right, who's the next generation up to be leaders? How do I put myself in front of them more? So it would be her, my stepmom, Robin.
Oh, well, Robin, we want to take the time to thank you for inspiring Brandon, because I'm enjoying our conversation today, and I know a lot of people around the world will enjoy his conversation too. So thank you for what you've done and what you continue to do. I love that because I think it's so interesting. You don't hear a lot about step parents being a very having that inspiring role. And I just want to point out to every one of us that everybody has the opportunity to be somebody's inspiration. And sometimes it's not some big grandiose moment or some act you commit. Sometimes it simply is holding a door for somebody. Or, Brandon, I don't know if I talked about this in the podcast, but like 3 weeks ago, I was taking off out of town to meet some friends for the weekend, and I was in a great mood. It was a Friday. I was driving 5 hours to meet some friends for a nice weekend of wine tour or a winery tour. And I went to a gas station, and as I was pulling, I could see this mother getting out of a SUV, and she was kind of frazzled. I could see she had a bunch of kids in the car, probably going to school, and I got in, I got my stuff. I just had a couple. It was a gas station. I was paying for gas, and I don't know, I grabbed a cup of coffee or something or a water, and she was behind me, and she just looked frazzled, and I could tell she was in a hurry. I said, "Hey," I told the gentleman at the counter, I said, "Hey, put hers on mine too." And she said, "What?" I said, I'm going to buy your stuff. Can you put it up on the counter?" And she was shocked. And she said, "What?" I said, "I'm going to buy your items for you." I mean, I'm like, how I said it 3 times. She goes, "Well, I've got all this stuff." I said, "Yeah, I don't." And then she pulled out of her, she had in her hand and some dog treats I have in my hand. I'm like, "Okay, you can put those on there." And the thing, Brandon, it wasn't my kindness, and that's not what I'm talking. It was her reaction to that small gesture that was so empowering for me and I thought about it the entire 5-hour drive. It just kept coming to me. She just said, I can't believe what you just did. She said, "You have no idea what you just did for me and how it'll impact me. You changed my entire day and my weekend." It was a Friday. I'm like, "Well, it was my pleasure." I said, "Pay it forward someday to someone else." She goes, "I most certainly will." And she skipped out of there a completely different person. Even physically, she looked different skipping out of there than she did frazzledly running in there in this kind of hysteric manner. It was just, I'm like, that's how you inspire people. Little gestures, man, random acts of kindness. We're going to do a podcast on this. I got a podcast I've been writing called the Rack 50 Challenge. I'm going to get everybody to do 50 random acts of kindness every year. And we can get the world to do that, man. We might change some things.
It's like that story, and I don't remember if it's, from a religious book or it's just an old kind of fable that's out there, but it's that idea of the person walking on the beach and there's all those starfish and they're seeing one person just tossing starfish back into the ocean who have beached themselves on the sand, and they walk up to the person throwing them and they say, "What are you doing? You can't possibly get all of these starfish back into the ocean. Like, what kind of difference are you going to make?" And the person picks up a starfish, tosses in the ocean, and says, "Well, I made a difference to that one." And like that idea of just, it's not everything. It's one thing that one person can do to make a difference.
100% truth. And I can't wait for Doug Linnick and Chuck Wackendorfer's book to come out here soon.
Oh yeah.
I'm so excited about that book. And I'm still waiting for an early release of it. Chuck said they're going to try to get the publisher to get me one, but I was hoping to get one because I'm going to get Chuck and Doug on here together and discuss that book. That's going to be a game changer, man. That's going to be a worldly successful book. There's no doubt about it.
I just purchased, because of your podcast, I went back and listened to the one with Doug you did a few months ago, and I've got a copy of The Simple Genius You now sitting on the counter. I gave it to my wife first, and then I'm going to read it. And I got one copy for our whole team. So everyone got one. So I'm like, "Hey, we gotta read this," because it sounded so right on.
Have you read it yet?
I haven't. I think I did a long, long time ago, but I honestly couldn't tell you what was in it.
Well, I still quote so many because we use that when I was a young leader at American Express. We use that quite a bit. We had everybody read it because what it's really good for, it gives you common language. because you all know about the two-bridge theory, you know about the term on dysregging somebody, which means distracting them. So I love that book. I think it's it's simple. Well, it's a simple genius. So yeah. So anyway, I'll try to include a link to that book on the podcast notes as well, in the show notes. So Brandon, you've had a lot of changes recently. I mean, obviously it was starting with XFA and stuff like that. But over the past year or two, what would you say has been your greatest learning and why?
Yeah. This was tough. I've got it narrowed down to two, and I tend to, what's the one, and I'll pick two. The first one was I really had to, over the past kind of 12 months, in the past year, it would have been around my lack of self-discipline. I thought that I was pretty dialed in. I thought I was pretty focused. I thought I was good at maintaining and keeping myself on track, dialed in to do the things I want to do. And then COVID happened. And all of a sudden, people weren't going into the office. And you're working from home. And the time that you have is much less structured. And I realized that I wasn't as good as I thought. That was an artificial strength that was part of the construct of going into the office, or I had people that reported to me. And so, being able to go and do, and stay dialed in when you have distractions, when you have things come up, is something I've actually had to do a lot of work on because I noticed it. I noticed, I got a half hour free here, and, I'm clicking around on, Yahoo, or I'm checking a news thing. And it just, for me, it was coming to the mirror and saying like, wow, okay. Like, for as high power as I talk about and consider and can bring to the performances or the coaching sessions or the live webinars, it's that downtime where I need some help. So I've been working on getting myself much more aligned for being focused on my kind of day to day when I've got some of that downtime, because I noticed without the constraints and the architecture around it, that was something that I really needed to work on to be as productive as I could.
So you actually found a human moment of where you were vulnerable. I mean, that's the problem. I see so often, Brandon, and I fall prey to this at times as well, where, I like to consider myself a very structured person. I'm not a structured person when it comes to certain things in life. Like, if you want to make plans with me, you probably should make them in 36 hours prior to the event. If you make it 3 weeks before, I'm not committing to it, because I'm not going to commit too far out. But as far as my day and my routine, I'm very structured with it. But at times, I get off path. And so many of us do, and you're like, where's this discipline, this self-discipline? Where is this structure that I had in place? And we tend to look at it as a frailty of our nature, when in reality, it's just a frailty of the human nature. And it's not specific to you or to this person or to myself. It's we all go in those moments. And we have to realize intellectually, I'm in it. That's the first thing. Admit you're in it, and then make those small, subtle changes to get out of it. Because, man, the thing is, most people get in it and they start to degrade themselves, self-deprecate. I'm just lazy. I don't have any discipline. I'll never make it. I'm not made for success. And it's a death spiral, man. It's a rabbit hole you don't want to go down. We all go through it. Every single person I know goes through it, and sometimes multiple times in their lives.
It's one of those. So what's helped me a lot is reframing when I notice something like that, a weakness, an opportunity to get better, a human condition that's there, is how do I turn this into a feature and not a bug? And I'm using software terms, but the distraction or the kind of lack of that regimented self-discipline on some things allow me to step into a meeting or a conversation that goes in a completely different direction, but I can pivot and move and react to that, or step into something and not have to have it fully scripted to feel comfortable. So that's the feature that comes along with that. I just need to work on the other part. So if you can turn some of these things into, okay, well, how is this actually really good? And I just need to kind of round off or sand down some of the rough edges. It turns more of that self-deprecation into, wow, I'm actually kind of thankful that I have the ability to do this. And would I give that up to be really good at the other side? Probably not. So you turn it into that, right? It's a feature of who you are, not a bug of your system.
I really like that. I really turn it into a feature rather than a bug. I'm writing that down, so bear with me just a moment here. I'm not a very fast writer.
Yeah.
That's perfect, man. I love that. So for all of the Bamboo Pack listeners out there, think about that. What do you right now in your life consider to be a bug? Something that is, but you're blaming yourself. You're feeling some guilt, some shame. You're feeling demotivated because of some bug, something you've done wrong, or something you don't feel has gone the way you want. Something you maybe have failed at, or you failed yourself at something. How do you turn that into a feature? Like you said, like Brandon said, rough out round out the rough edges. But how can you turn that into something that you can actually use as a lesson in life, as a growth opportunity, or as a whole new aspect of your character or your ability and talents that can take you to the next level? Because I do believe most challenges we go through are just, unless we're just a bunch of dipshits and we keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. Yeah, we're not talking to that person, but the person who is making mistakes, finding bugs in their system, but they're continuing to try to work through them. Usually those bugs or those challenges are just proof that we're getting closer to the goal. We're getting closer to that new revolutionary version of ourselves, that true peak identity, or so whatever we want to call it. We're getting closer and closer and closer, and the bugs are there. I mean, Randy Pausch, the Carnegie Mellon University professor who died of pancreatic cancer, I've quoted him many times on the podcast when he said, "Brick walls are not there to they're not there for us to stop. They're there for us to prove to ourselves how badly we want what's on the other side of that brick wall." So, that brick wall is a bug. It's like, how do we turn that bug into that brick wall or that bug into something we want? We scale it. We crash through it. We round out the edges, as Brandon said. So I love that, man. All right. You said there was another learning you had.
Yeah. So that was the first one. And then the second one was, I had this kind of mentality and this learning. And originally, I think if you go back and listen to my first, message to you, that it shows this. I struggled a little bit with the imposter syndrome, as it's called, and that was originally what I had brought up as, hey, this might be something to talk about because it's something I've been working on. So I am part of XFA. We just launched January, so I'm stepping into this arena where, yes, I do coach a lot of young and up-and-coming advisors, but I also work with people that have been in the business 20, 30 plus years. And so there's a level of, what can I bring to the table? Am I good enough? Am I going to be able to provide some of this value that they're paying for or they're looking for? Or, you look at some of your previous guests. I mean, they're esteemed and they're very, very successful. And one of the things that I've been working on is this mindset of one day more than yesterday. And I think about it with anything. Could be if you wanted to start working out. Could be if you wanted to learn guitar. Could be you want to change something. Maybe you feel, like you're drinking too much, or you want to cut out soda. And one of the most demotivating things that people can do, and that I was struggling, was looking at people who have been doing it for a long time. You look at these people, hey, I want to play the harmonica. And then you see John Popper from Blues Travelers. Nobody knows him or hasn't heard of him. He's a phenomenal prolific harmonica player.
If you haven't heard of John Popper, you should not be listening to this podcast. I mean, come on. If you want to stay as a Bamboo Pack member, you got to Google John Popper. Yeah, it's fantastic.
So looking at that, though, or looking at these people that have done it for so long and succeeded, can be really demotivating because it feels like this big mountain. And when you look at someone that, let's say it was something that you wanted to start going to the gym. I remember this was incredibly intimidating for me, because I started going to a gym, and there are people that have been going there 10, 15 years doing things that I'm not even close to or will likely never do. But it got demotivating. So I just started telling myself, what makes us the same is that we're both doing it one day longer than we did yesterday. So when I look at, coaches or people who have been doing things for a long time, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I could ever get to that point. It's really breaking it back to say, well, what did I do today? Did I get one day better than I was yesterday? Because that's all they're doing now. They just happen to have more days at the moment. But if I'm on the same level as them and I'm doing it one more day, well, then I'm just as good as them right now. And reframing that mindset, again, I see it with a lot of young folks like, oh man, I don't know, this client is in their 60s and they're a millionaire, and I'm up against advisors who have been in the business for 20 years. Well, you're doing it just one day longer than you did yesterday. I mean, so it's. I don't know if the idea is completely connecting, but just having that mentality, or I think an easy one to think about is, someone who wanted to quit something. And I know this has been talked about on the podcast before, but, if someone wanted to quit a habit, a drug habit, drinking, you look at someone who's been sober for 25 years. And while that can be inspiring and it's good to look up and acknowledge, it also can be really intimidating, because you have people that are like, well, I'm on day 2.
Right.
Well, you're just doing it one day longer than you did yesterday, which is what they're doing. So you're kind of just using that to level the playing field and really, try to dial in, instead of thinking about life in years, think about it in days, hours. What can I do? What's important right now to get me to better live in alignment with my 3 things? And that's something that I've really dialed in, because I felt that I'm not the youngest guy in the industry. I'm 37. I'll be 38 this year. But, working with people that have been in the industry longer than I've, been reading in some cases, having that mentality of, hey, we're both at the same spot here. We're just doing it one day longer than we did yesterday, tends to make it a lot more manageable and leads to more motivation for me.
I think that completely encapsulated what you were talking about with this imposter syndrome. What you just did is you summed up the whole philosophy behind the Bamboo Lab, which is, you plant this Chinese bamboo seed in the ground, you nourish it, you water it, you make sure it has the right sunlight. You come back every day, you don't see a lot of growth. Nothing comes through the earth, and sometime between the 4th and the 5th year, the tree, it's actually a grass, but it shoots up and explodes through the earth, and it grows 80 feet in the first 60 days, and it becomes one of the most durable trees in the world. Where all these other trees that grew quickly break off in hurricanes and typhoons, and the bamboo tree just kind of bends and comes back to true form. Because what it was doing in all that time, all those 3 or 4 years, was it was growing such an established and strong, powerful root system underground that nothing can tear it apart. And I think we look at growth, we look at as what we can see right now, what we can hold in our hands, when most of that growth is happening, like you said, by doing one day longer than yesterday. Just doing it again the next day, a little bit better, a little bit more, a little bit with a little more gusto or whatever. A little 1% improvements, man. That's what it's all about. Stop looking at the overall goal and just look at the process of what you're doing to get there and make the adjustments as is necessary. I think you summed it up right perfectly. I'm not saying people have to take 3 or 4 or 5 years to be successful or grow, but that's obviously for the Chinese bamboo tree it does. But it's looking at what we're doing every day. I love that, man. Don't look at the years or the months. Look at the moment right now. Are you a better person, a better version of yourself today than you were yesterday? And what can you do at this moment to become a better version tomorrow than the person you are today? I think you summed it up perfectly fine, my friend.
It's and to your point, right? When's the best time to plant a seed? well, it was yesterday, but the second best day is today.
Right.
And just getting started. I use an analogy. So you can't, we're on the phone, but if we were on video, one of the things that's a hobby of mine is I enjoy on downtime as kind of a relaxation thing is working on Legos. The Lego toys that are out there. And there's one that's behind me. That's the Titanic. It's 9,900 pieces. And I'm working on another big one that's about 10,000. But looking at those, when you look at them, it looks really intimidating because there's these piles of pieces. It's like, oh my gosh, how long is this going to take? Is this going to be worth it? I don't even know how much time I have. And then you just put a piece on. And then you grab the next piece and you put that piece on. And then eventually after putting, 9,000 pieces over, whatever it is, a month, 2 months, you now have something. And so there's power in the just one brick at a time. The key is just to start. And I think you and I had talked about that in our kind of pre-show, but I think about now there were times before I reached out to you that I was like, I should shoot Brian a note. And then I was like, I don't know. I'm not sure if he cares. And then I really started just listening to the heart notes that came in, or the heart letters. I was like, you know what, he does. And then again, it's that idea of, well, yeah, but I'm kind of small fish. Do I want to bug him with it? And I figured I'll just do a one-liner, say, hey, thanks, it's been really helpful. And, that was my seed, and it planted in, 1 month. Here we are.
That's perfect. Now watch, I'm going to get a bunch of one-liners from people on coming up to me.
Yeah, I just opened the door.
I'll take them all in, man. I'll consider anybody to come on here, but I'm really happy you reached out. I just love what you said though, one brick at a time. And I want to talk to the listener out there right now who is maybe feeling like they're looking at the mountain or the challenge they have or this massive goal they have in front of them and they just don't know where to go. Think about that Lego example. You're building a 10,000 piece Lego set of the Titanic and just grab the first brick, snap it to the second brick, and every day put a brick on, and do a couple bricks. Every day, incremental progress, man. Incremental progress leads to exponential gains every single time. It's called the aggregation of marginal gains. These marginal little gains we make every day, they aggregate over time like an investment. And pretty soon you hit that tipping point where it just goes through the roof. It goes through the roof. There have been many times, Brandon, where I have really considered giving up on coaching and speaking and writing. And I mean, probably 3 times in the almost 27 years I've been doing this. And, just get to the point where like, man, when am I going to reach this next tipping point? Because you get on that plateau for a while. That plateau is a really dangerous place to be. You're moving forward. You're just not moving up, and you're moving forward and just keep making that, just got to keep making progress. Then you hit that next ladder and then you go up. Then you get on a plateau for a while. As long as you don't stop and you keep moving forward, you might not feel you're moving up, but you're moving toward that next ladder and you're climbing that mountain little by little by little.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's we might get into it when we talk about like hardest or most difficult time. But there's a quote that's meant a lot to me as I have developed and found where I landed or bounced around from thing to thing, and it comes from one of my favorite books, which is Alice in Wonderland. And I think there's a lot of great analogies. I actually wrote my college thesis final paper on that book, but there's a quote in there where Alice talks to the Cheshire Cat and she says, hey, can you tell me which way I'm supposed to go? The cat says, that really depends on where you want to get to. And she goes, I don't really know or care where I get to, just as long as I get somewhere. Cat says, well, then it doesn't matter which way you go. As long as you keep going, you're bound to get somewhere. And just that idea of keep going. You'll end up somewhere.
You will end up somewhere. You definitely will. And it goes back to what Paul talked about, a week or so ago is be open to the sliding doors, because sliding doors can change your life and put you in a direction you have no idea. There's always the saying that life happens while we're making plans. And I'm not saying I'm not big on making plans. My family would say my dad doesn't make plans very well. Like I said, I'm a last minute guy for most social invites, but in life, I do believe we have to have plan. We have to plan certain things out, but man, you can't plan too far out. you got to be open to sliding doors and open windows and open doors. And my life changed dramatically last fall and into a direction I didn't think it would go. And now I look at myself today and I'm like, it was the best thing that ever happened in the long run. And I wouldn't have said that 6-7 months ago, but in the long run it is. And doors shut and two open, type thing. So Be open. All right. We are going to get to the next question. So Brandon, I always give everybody the opportunity to not answer this question, but I know you're going to, so I'm not going to give you that opportunity. All right. So Brandon, what is the most challenging thing or difficult thing you ever gone through? And what did you do to scale that proverbial wall when it happened?
Yes. So to me, and I've talked a little bit, because as I mentioned in the beginning, I led a fairly blessed life. It wasn't, I was really struggling with what to come through, and then it hit me. And I can't remember the number of years now, 5, 6, maybe 7. I got divorced, and it was a situation where, as I was going through it, as much as I wanted to place blame, as much as I wanted to say, well, it's this person's fault, or they did this, so this is why that happened. But yeah, it's revisionist history. And it was the first time I really had to sit down and think through, like, I also wasn't holding up my end of the bargain. And it hit me because until that point, I had always been successful in what I wanted to do. I applied for jobs and, I was fortunate to get the opportunities. And, everything had been moving through a very almost prescribed, like, this is what what people tell you life should be. And what ended up happening was, I found out that, one, we shouldn't have gotten married. That was a mistake, but we both had that feeling of, well, it's what you're supposed to do. This is what's next. And we didn't have the conversation. We just kind of assumed that's what it would be. And, it ended as amicably as it could, but I remember just getting rocked. And that first kind of feeling of, I'm not as good as I thought I was. And it was that self-realization of, I deserve just as much as the blame as, it takes two to tango in a relationship. And it just was that real gut punch of, I thought I was one way and, I wasn't. And it was, that veil got pulled. And so I really had to come to, truth with myself as to, well, I got a lot of stuff here that maybe I'm getting by, I'm masking, I'm lying to myself about. And so one of the things I had to do is, first off, just really reflect and go internally to say, what happened? Why did it happen? And come to peace with the idea of, this was, people make mistakes, you move on. I'm married to my wife. I have a stepdaughter. None of that would have happened if, that I hadn't gone through that. But for me, I remember a lot of kind of late nights, just laying in bed thinking and, having, crying and trying to figure out, like, why did it go so wrong? And really being honest with myself that as much as you want to put on the brave face, you gotta own some of this as well. And so that, I think, for me, was the first time I really got brought down heavily to earth and had that first time where life wasn't going down the exact path that I always thought or assumed it would. And so for me, it was just going forward, one foot in front of the other, figuring out, okay, what's the next thing to do? Again, it was very amicable. I think we filed on a Monday. It was done by Friday. It was easy. Everything was very cordial because I think we both had the realization of, like, yep, shouldn't have done this, but now let's move on. But, cataloging out what do I want, cataloging out where did it go wrong, and just saying, what would I do next time? And knowing, like, I think Doug says it, right? Forgiveness is acceptance of the past.
Yeah.
And there was no going back, right? You can't rewind the clock. It's done. So now the next bit is, what do I need to do to learn, be better, and make sure this doesn't happen again? And so there's a lot of time just figuring that out and trying to, put pieces in place and figure out what, when plans, as you said, change, right? Projecting out, family life and what, the house that we had bought 6 months earlier was now on the market, or maybe a year earlier, I don't remember, but just some of those things in that abrupt change, I realized that what I could control is what happens next, and not focusing on everything that happened weeks, months ago, and just trying to stay really tight on, okay, what can I do today? What can I do tomorrow? What can I do next week to keep moving forward? So for me, that was it. It was going through that. And now again, that was years ago. And I look at my life now and I'm like, wow, yeah, I believe she's happy, healthy, has her own family, and I'm doing my thing. And it turned out right for both of us. But at the moment, I feel like problems and challenges in life are it's like driving in a car through the rear view mirror.
Yeah.
When you leave your house, let's say you were going to drive out of your driveway and just drive straight down a road. When you get to the bottom of your driveway and you look in the rear view mirror, the house looks big. It's right there. It's huge. But as you continue to move forward, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually you don't even see it. And I think life's challenges can be a lot like that when it comes to how recently it happened, right? It happened yesterday, so it's a big mistake and it's a huge problem, and it's right here in my rear view, and I'm so focused on it. But if you think about, continuing to go forward, it's going to get a little bit smaller every day until eventually you're going to say, boy, gosh, I remember when I messed that one up. That was a mistake. Oh, well, and you moved on, right? So I think that's a big part of what I did as well, is just reminding myself it's big for today, but tomorrow it's going to be a little smaller. And it might not be, I didn't know if it was going to be a year, if it would be longer of me kind of going through this, but I knew that each day it was going to be just a little bit further in the rear view.
That's a power. I wish I would have done this podcast back in September. You would have saved me about 3 months of heartache. It's so true, though. I love what you said. That I love that rearview mirror example. I think I've never heard that before, and I think that's so powerful because it is true. The problem is with a lot of people is they never leave their driveway. So the problem just stays there. It's just as big tomorrow and next week or next month or next year as it was when it first happened, because they're still parked in their driveway. I had a situation, Brandon, in early September of this year where, it was a big change in my life, and I was very heartbroken and went through a couple of months, a pretty dark period. I'm not talking suicidal, but just dark, man. Same thing. When you said I felt rocked, that's the way I felt. I just, they're crying and just all this confusion. And I got a text from a client or from a friend of mine in Las Vegas on a Sunday morning. And she said, "What are you going to do for self-care this week?" And it was after about 2 months of me kind of feeling sorry for myself. And I'm like, wow, that's a really good question. So I put a list of 26 things down. I still use the list every week. It's things like, I'm going to call my son 7 days a week. I'm going to call my daughter and my mom 7 times a week. I have a list of friends I'm going to keep in contact with. It's how much I lift weights, how much I exercise, how much I meditate, the water I drink, the vitamins I take. I have a list of 26 things that are all deal with self-care. Nothing professional, although they'll have a direct impact. And so my expectation out of those 26 things is I have to get 21 things done every week. So right away, it turned my focus. And what I did at that moment, when I started putting that list together back in, I'm going to say November now, is I put my foot on the gas and I started pulling away from that house. And that house got smaller, that problem got, that challenge, that difficulty got further and further away. It got smaller in the mirror. Now, to say that, am I saying that it's the best thing that ever happened to me? No. But at a certain point after several months of doing that, I start seeing that it is what it is. I had to accept the situation and move forward. And then finally, now I'm not even looking, I'm very seldom looking in that rear mirror. I'm looking in the mirror, what do you call it? The windshield. Looking in the windshield now, yeah. And I'm seeing what's up ahead in life, And then it's what you said is so powerful that I love that. I have a guest coming on. I'll be interviewing in 2 days, Dr. Fred Luskin, and he has a book out. He's got several books out, but his book is Forgive for Good. He's a Stanford University professor, and he is actually the director and co-founder of the Stanford University Forgiveness Program. And we had a really unique conversation 3 weeks ago on a Friday evening. Or 4:00, I guess it was. We talked for probably an hour on the phone, and I had never met him, but he was a connection through Art DeLorenzo. They're good friends. They do a lot of work together. And I had followed Dr. Luskin's work online for years. And his whole thing is, talked about, like you said about Doug, it's about what that forgiveness can do for us. And I talked to Dr. Luskin about it a little bit. I talked to Art after our podcast episode about how I hold some anger, not toward this situation from September, but from other people in my life. And, so I'm so excited. Unfortunately, Dr. Luskin's book won't arrive in time for me to read it before the podcast. It comes tomorrow. I talked to him on Thursday, but I can't wait to dive into that book when it gets here. So I'm going to have to.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, just make sure I get your address. I'll send you a copy. I'll buy it.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be
one thing that I think is profound that you said a couple times, but I haven't called it out. And you've said this multiple times with how you run and structure your life. And you created, just using the most recent one, that example of these are things I do each week.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I see people, and it's not our fault, it's a general society thing, is if you think back to, when people were before cities and there was, kind of the hunter-gatherer, we're generally, human beings are geared for immediate gratification, immediate feedback, immediate, alleviation when we do something, right? So if, way back when, if someone was hungry, they hunted, they ate. If they were thirsty, they found water, they drank, no longer thirsty. But society now is, if I make, I'll just talk in sales, just because I know that, but like if I do something and I make a sale today, I might not see the actual result of that or any feedback or any monetary reward for 3-6 months.
Right.
And so you get these energy spikes where when you start a goal, you're really excited and then you plateau. And then, when you get up to the deadline, maybe your energy kicks up again because you've got that fear of missing the deadline. But if you can do things like you did, every day I'm going to do this. Every week I'm going to do this. You can rewire your brain and your activity to, instead of just think about the long term, if you can just do the one thing that starts the domino effect that leads to your goal, and you can control that right now, that's how you can really manage your energy, manage happiness, get that gratification and that reward from, yes, I made the 20 calls I had to make today. I did these emails that I had to get done today. And you've said it multiple times, how you manage on a week to week. Hey, this was a good week because.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really powerful way to think about and go about living your life. Is don't think about it quarter to quarter, year to year, but what about today or this week? Amen. And that creates that serotonin rush that keeps you motivated.
It does, man. I mean, we focus so much on lagging measures in our society. The lagging measures, let's say somebody wants to lose 30 pounds and they're focused so much on the 30 pounds that they're getting on the scale every day, day 1, day 2, day 3. They don't see any results for 3 weeks maybe, and they get discouraged. And what they got to focus on, we have to focus more on the leading measures, the things that we're doing to get to that 30 pounds of weight loss, the exercise, the dietary control, the meditation, the reading on physical health and whatever we have to do. Focus on those things, man. Plant that seed, nourish it, water it, get it the sunlight. Don't worry about it. It's going to come through. It's going to come through. Just don't every day expect to see anything budding through the ground. It's going to burst through. When it does, man, when you hit that tipping point in life, it is the most amazing experience in the world. When you start seeing the results of all those days of sweat, blood, and tears.
And I was just saying, you stop being stressed about the things you can't control.
Amen.
Right? Can I control how fast my body metabolism sheds the weight? No. So why am I going to stress about it? It's a bucket 3 thing, right? I can't control it. So it's like sitting in a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it's not going to get you anywhere. Right? And so if you can take the focus off of that and instead on what can I do right now you can feel productive and like you're making progress up that hill.
Hell yeah. 100%. I actually literally just worked with 2 or 3 clients this morning on what I call my CIA method. It's the same thing as the buckets: control, influence, and accept. And everything in life, everything we face, you can either control it, or you can maybe influence it, or you have to accept it. And every challenge we go through, or every change, there are aspects of what can you control, what can you merely influence, and what do you have to simply accept. And when you can break a challenge or a change in life into those and say, okay, here I'm going through a change. Okay, I'm going through a situation, a big challenge. What do I have to accept? What are some things I have no control or influence over? Write those things down. Then write down what you can influence. And usually the only 2 things you can influence is you can influence certain people and you can influence the outcome of certain situations. And then you write down, but what can I control? And list all the things that you can control right now to get through this challenge. And then take out and erase all the things, or cross off the things you have to accept. Don't discuss them. Don't think about them. Don't worry about them. Don't try to solve the problem. Just only focus on the things you can control. Because by doing that, you will influence the people in the situation the way you need to. And if we could just do that, man, CIA everything. CIA, we go through 3 or 4 crises every year as a human being. And in between those crises, there are probably 15 different little emergencies that come up or more that are sprinkled in between. So I tell people every quarter, get out the CIA method and say, okay, what am I going through right now? Or what am I about to go through? What change or challenge? And put down and say, what do I have to accept about it? What can I influence and what can I control? And focus on only what you can control. Man, it saves a lot of heartache. I don't know why I didn't do it 7 months ago. I'm the cobbler's kids. I'm the cobbler whose kids wear no shoes sometimes. I think, hey, I have a great idea. Why didn't I use that? But it took a friend of mine from Vegas to ask me what I'm going to do, and that made me think, hey, that's what I can control. So, okay, so Brandon, I got a question now. You and I'm going to shoot over to Minnesota today. We're going to get in my time machine. We're going to shoot back to that kind of stumbling college grad of you, that man you were when you were kind of bouncing around, and you're going to sit down and talk to that 22-year-old version of Brandon Hegg. What would you say? What piece of advice, words of wisdom, recipe for success would you tell that young man?
Yeah. So for me, stumbling was probably very accurate for that age coming out of college. But what I would tell myself is nobody has a playbook for life. There's no script. I don't care what movie you've watched, what show you've seen. There's no right way to do something. The right way is what works for you. And so what I would have told myself is, instead of doing what you think you're supposed to do and what you think your family or your view on media or whatever it is that you think you're supposed to do what you want. You got time. You don't need to grow up quite yet. Try things out. And find out what it is that you love. And if something doesn't go your way, that's all right. If we all got the same script when we were born, which is not one. And so, quit that idea of comparison. And, one of the things that I really had to do is step away from, things like social media, because you see, that very tainted view of like only the best that's out there. And it causes a lot of mental anguish for people. So my thing would be, dude, be you. And there's no script. There's nothing to follow. Do what you want. Do what inspires you. And then, if you're 37 and you still haven't figured it out, that's okay.
I love it.
You only got one shot, so do it all.
I love it. I have a friend of mine out in Seattle, Jody, and she always would tell me, you do you, boo. You do you, boo. I'm like, yeah, okay, all right, makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to stop that, and I'm going to capture that wisdom that Brandon just shared for. So the advice you would give to your former self, I'd like to share that advice with the Bamboo Pack. Nobody has a script, nor do they have a playbook for life. The right way is what works for you. So instead of doing what you think you're supposed to do, what society thinks you're supposed to do, what your family thinks you're supposed to do what you want to do. You only have one shot at this whole thing, man. You got maybe 80, 100, 110 years. I don't know what you have left in this earth, or up to where when we leave. Some of us much shorter. Do what works for you, man. Try things out. I love that. Try things out, because when you're trying those things out and you're not so focused on this particular line of goal or this line this trajectory you're on, we think life is linear. Life is complex and dynamic. When we put these linear, masks on, or these blinders on, we miss all these grand opportunities that are around us, these doors and windows that are opening around us, but we only see that closed door that's so far up in the future that we're trying to get to. But all these other greater doors are opening up around us. And if it doesn't work your way, who cares? Keep going. Keep going, man. You be you. I love that, man. That's a great capsulation of the podcast.
Yeah, there's a last little thing here. There's a really great, if nobody's seen it, there's a great Jim Carrey quote from when he was doing a commencement or some kind of speech at a college. And he tells the story of how his dad was, working for a company for 25, 30 years and got laid off. And his family was all of a sudden like, oh gosh, what are we going to do? And he had the epiphany of, you could do something you don't like for 30 years and still fail. If I'm going to fail, but why don't I do it around something I like to do? Because it can happen either way. Right. So you might as well do something you enjoy.
Amen to that. I saw a really good quote today. I'm going to recommend anybody on Instagram who can follow this source post. It's called Vibe Source on Instagram. Get on it, man. This dude has like 1 million followers so far, and he's growing. He's got a Netflix documentary coming out hopefully soon, or Hulu. It's got a bunch of people are vying for it. And he's got the most incredible quotes every day that resonate so well with me. And with 1 million followers and growing, I'm sure you're close to 1 million growing. It resonates with a lot of people. I had lunch 2 weeks ago with his father and another person a friend of ours. And I didn't even know this guy we were talking about his son. And I'm like, he's got this Instagram thing he does. And he's a filmmaker. And I'm like, what's his Instagram? He goes, the Vibe Source. I said, are you kidding me? I said, I follow, and then he goes, yeah, he's got like 200,000 followers. So I was sitting at lunch and I got on my phone. He says he got 987,000 followers. He's got a lot of followers. Jeez. And so I said, I need him on my podcast. So we're going after him soon. All right, Brandon, awesome. So you got all this cool. You got 15 years in the industry. You've gone through a divorce several years ago. Now you're remarried to a wonderful woman. You got this amazing, beautiful stepdaughter. You got this founding member of this new company, XFA, which we're going to include a link to. And I want everybody out there to explore this, especially if you're a financial advisor or anyone. Explore their website. These guys are amazing. Okay, what's next for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that's I've got a couple goals, and now going back against my original recommendation, these are goals over the next kind of 3 to 5, but I want to put a book together about being a financial advisor for new financial advisors. I think there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of the fake it till you make it kind of mentality for some of this. And I think it leads to a lot of turnover and burnout. So I'm working with, I'll be working with, my colleague, John, on putting together something that helps young people kind of step into this role, this industry, and some really simple tips on how to get started and how to grow. The other really exciting thing we're doing is we're working with a gentleman named Rob Knapp. He wrote a book called Supernova Advisor, and he has a program called Supernova Scholars that's all about, it's a scholarship program for a select number of minority students who want to get into the financial services industry. And so I'm doing some training classes with them to, kind of give them some sales skills, put them on the right path to create just more representation in the industry, which is, if you look, it's pretty lacking, but getting better over time. And it's certainly a need in the industry. And then I think we're going to continue to grow. I like doing these podcasts. I've only done a couple, and one was more of a comedy one about video games that I was on, or things like this where you just kind of talk and share ideas. And I think some of the best ideas come from this organic discussion. So I'm kicking around the idea of putting something or getting more involved in something like that, because as you mentioned, the rear view thing, that just popped in my head when we were talking. And it might resonate to someone, and it wouldn't have come out if you had asked me this morning what I was going to talk about. And so I think there's just such value in having these conversations and allowing people to listen in. So for me, it's continuing to grow. It's putting an idea together for the book, working with these young scholars, and then try to see how I can get more involved in things like this.
I think that's amazing. That book is a necessity. Trust me, it's a necessity.
I agree. I looked for it. They don't exist, and I think a lot of the books people read are the ones from a long time ago.
Ooh, yeah.
And there's just not a new, fresh take on it.
I mean, back in the day, especially with American Express, now Ameriprise, they had the best new advisor training in the world by far. Everybody wanted to go to American Express or IDS and get their training. Sometimes they'd go to another company, but they wanted their training through that company. And so I was very blessed to be trained that way, and then very blessed to train that way when I went into management. There's nothing like that anymore. You guys are offering that, and that's a godsend for new advisors coming into the industry, because I don't see it very often. And I see a lot of young advisors come in with very little direction. And quite frankly, it's like 3 generations away. So their managers really might not have the ability to train that way either, because they weren't trained, in a very structured, specific manner. So it's necessity. And I think if you write that book, I'll make sure a lot of my clients, even though I'm very blessed to say my clients do a very good job of training their new advisors, but the ones that other ones I've seen, there's some ugly stuff out there, man. And it's costing careers, man. That's the thing. It costs people careers. And when you don't have that type of training and that guidelines and structure for new advisors, and not only that, but it costs the financial lives of the people they would have impacted, that they never will get to impact because they didn't have the right training, or they left, or they're just kind of stumbling around, still trying to figure it out after 5 or 10 years. So I think that's great.
I agreed, and it's one of those where it becomes this is how I did it, so do it like this. Which, while yes, that is how, if I went to someone and said, hey, here's how I started when I was an advisor, do things like this, that's not how they're done anymore. And by continuing to kind of fall back on this is how I did it, it really stunts and can slow down the evolution and growth in the industry.
100% agree. My daughter's a financial advisor. She's had her license now for 10 or 11 years, and she's now with a company that thankfully I have the pleasure of coaching the company. They're one of my clients, and that's not how she got the job, but they're constantly training, and they have sales training. They have leadership training where I come in, and peak perform. I mean, it's constant training, and you see the difference in that type of company rather than the other ones who say, okay, here you go. And back in the day, when we started, it was here's a phone book, a script, and a telephone. Here's your call. But then they taught us how to do it. But now they kind of do that same thing metaphorically, but they don't give them the training on how to do the stuff. Go get clients. Well, I don't even know what I do for a living. I mean, most of these people that come in and go, I don't know. I just got my license. So, hey, I support that book, man. Hey, Brandon, as we wrap up, one last question. What would be a final message you would like to leave with the Bamboo Pack out there?
I think the takeaway that I'd like people to know or like people to take away is as I said, I always pick two things. One would be, if you're trying to scale a mountain, if you're trying to start something new, if you're trying to look for, a goal achievement, don't compare yourself to people who have already done it for a long time. And instead just think about, all right, I'm one day closer than I was yesterday, and find out what those things you can do for today, this week, to help you achieve that. Because that, again, it's something I see out there is, well, I don't even want to start because look how good they are. Mm-hmm. Everyone started from the same spot. So that's one. The other one would be, I like the idea around the rearview mirror. When you're going through it, when you're having challenges, when you make even a simple mistake, I sent this email and I shouldn't have. Just remember, it only seems big because you're still in the driveway. Keep driving forward. It'll slowly get further and further in your rear view. Some things faster than others as you go forward. But as long as you keep driving forward, even if you don't know where you're going to go, you're going to get somewhere. And that problem, as you separate from it, will become much more manageable and less of the gigantic, really the house blocking your view of the rest of the world.
Well, I love the rearview mirror thing so much. I'm going to be talking to you soon because I'm going to make sure I put a section in my book as we're getting ready to wrap that thing up a little bit. I want to use that, but you are going to get full credit for it. It's going to be yours, man.
Feel free.
It's going to be yours.
I'll make you a deal. You can use that if I can use CIA.
TM, trademark pending. I'm just kidding. No. Oh, no. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that. No, of course you can use that. Of course. This is all. I don't worry about. I don't trademark a lot of things or copyright a lot of things. Or copyright, I guess. All right. Hey, we're going to wrap up now, Brandon. This was amazing. You did a fantastic job, brother. This was one of the most wisdom-packed episodes I've ever done. It really was.
Well, thank you for that. I have people waiting to listen. I've been doing my job and sharing with multiple people. I think I sent Sabrina's out at least a dozen times. So if anybody hasn't listened to that one, phenomenal. But thank you for having me. This stuff does just little nuggets here and there do so much good, and you never know what the one thing that clicks with someone, and it's like, I never thought of it that way. And it just, it helps.
It does, man. It's just listening to people talk and learning from two people talking and then being included in the conversation as we try to do with the Bamboo Pack by bringing them into it. That's how I learn. I learn so much from having guests on my podcast. This is where I'm getting most of my learnings now is, doing 1 to 3 podcasts every week and just getting this wisdom. I'm like, wow, I never, some of it's the same stuff over and over, but it's said in a different way from a different perspective and a different use of words or analogies or metaphors or stories. And then all of a sudden it connects. It's like, wow, that's like that rearview mirror thing. That's powerful. That's yours though. That's all yours. So,
well, hey, we brought it up together. It generated in our discussion.
It came from your brain though. So, all right. Well, give my best to John, please, today when you talk to him, and we'll talk a few minutes here after we get done recording. But I just want to thank you, Brandon Hegg, for being actually an incredibly wise and fun and inspiring guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Brian, I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing these upcoming shows you're recording this week as well.
Yeah, we got some good ones coming up too. So, all right, everyone. I want to thank you all, Bamboo Pack member, for tuning in this week. We're probably going to be putting out a lot more podcasts, more than one a week at least, for a while, because the demand is there and the supply is there of amazing guests, just like Brandon today. So we'll talk to you soon, everyone. In the meantime, get out there and sculpt your life. Get out there. Strive to give and be your best, man. Show love and respect to others, but also to yourself. And just live intentionally. Enjoy each and every single part of the journey. All right. I appreciate each and every one of you. Remember, one brick at a time. That's Brenda's message. Take care, everyone. Thank you all.